Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this full meeting of Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee held in part via Microsoft Teams. Please note that this meeting for the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being live streamed and will be recorded by the Council to support the production of the minutes for the use of democratic services. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the chair, mute your microphone when you're not talking. If accessing via Teams only, always turn on your video function while invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphone when speaking and please mute or turn off your microphone when you're not talking. If you would like to speak on an item, please do by raising your hand feature on the bottom Teams or of course in the room actually raising your hand. I will read the thing because we do have some people who are not part of BCP here. So for those in the room, please note that the fire alarm sounds. I don't believe this one's scheduled. Please exit the building by the way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point outside the front of the annex building. I think it's just generally follow the officers. They know where they're going. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you. So apologies. I know I've had apologies from Councillor Rocker. I know Councillor Lisa Northover is attending by Teams and therefore is not in the room. I've also had apologies from Councillor Dan Butt. I've also, although she's not a member of the committee, she's the portfolio holder, I know in the meeting either. I'm saying that because I've got a statement from her which I'll read out later on in the meeting. Do we have any other apologies at all?
No, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. And any substitute members at all? I can't see any in the room.
No substitutes.
Right, thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interest or any local interests on any items on the agenda? Doesn't look like so. So we'll move on. So if anybody does during the meeting, just let me know. The minutes. The minutes you've all hopefully seen. Can I ask, are there any issues with the minutes? Yes, Eddie.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, on the minutes, it did say about child exploitation and that we were lobbying or going to lobby our local MPs. Did we do that or have we had any comeback on that?
Has anybody done that? I don't know. So we'll have to put that in as an action point then from this meeting. Thank you for raising that. Any other points on the minutes? So we're quite happy with them. We just want that moving forward as an action point. Okay, great. In that case, if you just give me a minute, I shall sign the minutes. Thank you very much. The action sheet. We've got a couple of things now. First off, one of the action on the action sheet was for me to attend the CNC Overview and Scrutiny Committee to ask some questions on your behalf, and I attended that, and it's on the minutes. So I shan't go through it. You're all welcome to read the minutes and watch it online if you wish. I've just got some action points from the members of the Youth Parliament about the survey created, and only 2 people completed the survey, resent, but only 2 people completed the survey. So I think there's some disappointment there, but the members of the Youth Parliament did it. That members of the Youth Parliament to make contact with Councillor J. Butt, lead member for engagement. The contact made, but a date to meet not arranged yet. or contact made with Councillor Haynes, which I believe it did happen, and with got any support, and it was a meeting happened. Hala met with Councillor Haynes to explore support she can offer. This helps form the type of approach, and so that was very useful. There was independent chair to attend the youth forum to detail the work for the board. That's not yet been completed. And on the other side, the request for members of Youth Parliament shared the survey as much as possible with the head teachers and SENCOs, increasing the response. The Children's Rights and Engagement team shared the survey via their email list. Note the timescale very short, no knowledge of outcome as a result of sharing those with this role. So there have been some actions gone on there. Any other comments on action sheets? No? Okay. Public issues. I don't believe there's any public issues.
No public issues, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. So to the first substantive, joint inspection of Dorset Combined Youth Justice Service. So this item's here so that we have an understanding of the outcome of the recent inspection for the Joint Youth Justice Service. That's a joint between Dorset and BCP, which happened in September and October last year. So I'd like to welcome David Webb, who's the Youth Justice Service Manager, to present the report. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give a brief summary of the inspection report. So HMI Probation are the lead inspectorate for inspecting youth justice services. They undertake an inspection of all youth justice services in the period 2018 to 24. They're in the middle of a programme of inspections. Most of their inspections are what they call single inspections, where it's just them as the inspectorate, and they spend 1 week of field work along with process of evidence in advance. But each year they undertake a small number of what they describe as joint inspections, which is the version that we received in BCP and Dorset in the autumn. And the full joint inspection process includes inspectors from other inspectorates. So the HMI for Police, Fire and Rescue Services, the an Ofsted inspector, ex-Ofsted inspectors for social care and for education, and there would have been a CQC inspector for health services, except that she went sick the day before the field work started. So there's a rigorous process of providing evidence in advance, then a fieldwork week of inspecting 62. They inspected 62 cases in depth, and then a second fieldwork week meeting with team members and partners and testing out what they'd found in the evidence in advance and in the casework inspections. The report was published in January, and you will have seen that the rating overall for the service was good. I will take the liberty of noting that under the full joint inspection process, no service has ever been rated outstanding. It's a more rigorous and detailed inspection regime. So obviously we were pleased with the outcome of good, and we recognise there are some things that we can still improve. The report, if you've read it, you'll have seen this in detail, but in summary, they found a consistent service across both local authorities. They were impressed by the partnership working both in terms of the resources from our partners such as police, health and probation, in terms of specialist staff in our service, and the quality of integrated work within our service by youth justice case managers and those specialist workers. They felt that it was clear to them that the workers in our service are good at building relationships with the children that we work with. They get to know the children very well and they adapt their work accordingly. And so there's lots of positive comments in the report along those lines. And I also had plenty of informal feedback from the lead inspector during the inspection process about how impressed they were with the workers in our service. They found good use of information and data, good staff, practice standards, training and supervision. They made positive comments about specialist worker roles in our casework. There's some comments from young people in the report as well, which are also heartening to see the positive comments, the quotations from young people. In the inspection report, there's detailed feedback on the casework that they inspected. And they also comment on disproportionality. And they found that our data shows that Black and Asian and mixed heritage children are not overrepresented. On the proportions on our caseload are broadly similar to the proportions in the population, but what we do find is that those children are perhaps more likely to be in the later stages of our cohort, so they've been to court and received a court outcome rather than solely being dealt with pre-court through police cautions. So the inspection, as well as identifying strengths and areas for improvement, the inspectors found, well, they provided 6 specific recommendations. Some of them are for the Youth Justice Service Partnership Board, which is the senior leaders from our partner organisations that provides the governance for our work. So there's a recommendation about the chairing arrangements for the board, also about partnership processes and understanding for child exploitation, about making sure that children in the Youth Justice Service receive their full education entitlement, a recommendation about joint working between the Youth Justice Service and Children's Social Care, particularly in terms of involvement in multi-agency meetings and access to social care records. And then two recommendations for me as head of service. One, that we should analyse in more detail the outcomes of the different types of out-of-court disposal, and that our assessments of children we should strengthen the element of the assessment that relates to the risk the child poses to other people. So we produced an action plan, which is we've now submitted to the inspectorate, and they've replied saying they're satisfied with it. And we are obviously initiating the actions to meet the recommendations and the areas for improvement which the inspectors reported.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I've made 2 notes here actually. One of them was from out my briefing. It says notes to remind me to encourage trumpet blowing. Now, I did hear a little fanfare there, but could you just remind? You say no authority has got outstanding. How common is good?
So in the single inspection, some youth justice services are rated outstanding, but in the format that we received, so far no service has been rated outstanding. They undertake, I think it's sort of 5 or 6 of these joint inspections a year, and the process has been going for 4 or 5 years. So I'm not sure about the numbers of good, requires improvement, or inadequate in the joint inspections, and they don't. On their website, it's not obvious which are the joint inspections and which are the single until you open up each report to find it out. So I haven't looked into that information, but I am aware that the best outcome is for Cheshire, which was another combined service, whose score out of the total 36 rating points was 26, and our score was 24. So we're similar to the kind of high point of the inspection outcomes for this framework.
So a slight numerical fanfare there. Thank you. Sandra, do you have a question?
Thanks, Chair. I'll remember to switch my microphone on now. Well, I think it was actually great to hear that the inspection received a good, and can I say well done to everyone involved. Throughout the reports, the inspectors commended the work of the speech and language therapists, and I think that's worth mentioning as well. Because they've clearly made an impact on the young people, and they also deserve our thanks, I think. Looking at the areas for improvement, I note the concerns about child exploitation crop up throughout the report. And obviously we do have a child exploitation working group, and we already heard from council and partners, especially the police, about all the work being carried out. So clearly there's a huge amount of work that is happening, but I believe I'm right in saying the results are not as good as we would like them to be. And the recommendations in the report include sharing best practice, improving staff understanding and response to child exploitation, mapping locations of risky areas, etc. So going back to our working group, I think, Chair, if that's all right, it would be good and really helpful to keep track on how these areas are improving via the working group. Yeah. And I know that May is fast approaching, so perhaps we could recommend that the new council continues the work of the working group. And I know they don't have to, but I do think it would be a really good idea if they did. And if we could have a sort of recommendation for them to carry on, that would be good. Thank you.
Well, the best thing to do is ask the rest of the members of the working group if they feel that would be
And come back after May, yeah.
Yeah, come, yeah. If we're not here, we should pass the mantle on to the next people. Yeah, yeah. Yes, I think that will be a good recommendation to pass forward. Thank you for that. I mean, I just have one question. It's just, as always, looking at the requires improvement bit, because we do that, don't we? And it's talking about the assessment requiring improvement and about this tool that's being used. My reading it seems like the seems to be down to some use of the tool, so lack of an understanding of the tool. Can you just explain what this tool is?
Yes. So there is a in-depth, detailed assessment tool which all youth justice services must use for children on court orders, called ASIT Plus, which is a very quite time-consuming and detailed assessment. For children on out-of-court disposal, so that would be children who've received a youth caution or a youth conditional caution or a community resolution, we use a shortened version, which we refer to as a brief assessment, although it's not that brief. The inspectors were testing out the idea that the part of the assessment that relates to the risk the child poses to other people was weaker than the other bits we were assessing, such as the risk to the child themselves and the likelihood of further offending. And they thought that possibly our assessment tool didn't enable us to get that in-depth, full assessment of the risk of harm that they would like to see. However, in the conversations that we had during the inspection, the conclusion that they reached was actually they did see some good assessments using that tool. So they thought that perhaps it was more to do with the training of new staff and how familiar they were with the fuller ASIT Plus tool and the concept of risk assessments. So we've done some work already to refresh the training for our newer staff on ASIT Plus and full risk assessments. And we've got some more activities planned, both with our managers, because they have to check every assessment and sign it off. So we want to make sure our managers are requiring it to be a good enough assessment before they sign it off, and with our case managers. And then finally, the Youth Justice Board are piloting a brief assessment tool for out-of-court disposals, which they will roll out nationally at some point during this year. So our local version will be replaced by a national document, albeit I think it'll be similar to the one that we currently use.
Right, thank you. That's very, very interesting, very useful. Zara, has got a question for you.
I turn my mic on too. While I think it's absolutely amazing we have reached good, I was wondering, obviously there's going to be some level of pursuit of the 6 priorities, but will there be a huge pursuit like there was to get to this point? Are we going to put the same amount of effort into reaching outstanding that we did to put in good? Because while it is great that we have gotten to this point, I still think if there is, these 6 priorities to be improved, will there be the same level of priority put on these actual criteria?
Thank you. It's a good question, because it might be tempting for us to think, and that's enough. But we definitely want to put our energies into meeting these recommendations, and our action plan actually also covers all the areas for improvement in the report, not just the recommendations, because we recognise there's more to do, and we also need to keep up with developing practice and new developments in youth justice. So the way that our service works, we keep trying to improve it. And you're right to say we need to make sure we put enough effort into improving it as we have to establishing a good service in the first place. The lead inspector said to me that the recommendations were about making a good service better, and that's something that we're really keen to do.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Yeah. May, yes.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to echo what Councillor Moore has already said. Congratulations, David, on getting a good rating. That's really, really great news to hear. So I've just got a question here, but it's really more for my own understanding. As part of the 6 recommendations, recommendation number 6, improve analysis and quality of assessment, I'm just thinking each case is slightly different because it depends on the individual involved and circumstances, etc., etc. So I'm just trying to sort of work out in my head, Is this something that is really achievable simply because each case can be very different?
Thank you. Yes, it is achievable. And the point the inspectors were making is that the aspects of our assessments relating to the risk posed to the child's own safety and to what they call desistance, the likelihood of offending, is good. They thought that, or even better than good, they thought that the risk of harm component of the assessments needed some work. So although each child receives their case is different and they receive an individual assessment, we can make sure that we cover the right issues in every assessment, particularly in terms of the risk of harm to others. So the kind of examples that the inspector gave in conversation were things like where we've identified the offence and possibly the risks posed by the offence. Have we asked enough questions about other behaviour that the child has undertaken, or other people that might be a risk from the child? So if, for example, a child is cautioned for carrying a knife in public, have we thought about the risks that it might pose at home or to siblings and so on? So we should do that, and we should make sure that our assessments cover all the possible risk scenarios, so we can improve that aspect of our work. I mean, I should reassure you that we do. They found evidence of us doing that. They just thought could be more consistent and in more depth. So we do undertake individual assessments. Councillor Moore was right. I was pleased to hear the comments about our speech and language therapists, because their assessment really helps us communicate better with the child and understand their individual needs. So the assessment is individual, but it does still need to make sure it covers the essential areas for all the children that we work with. So it is an achievable recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Chan. Thank you, David. That clarifies it.
Right, thank you. In that case, if there's nobody else who's got any questions, I'll just sum up. I mean, first off, my feeling this is actually a very useful report. I think it's one of those inspections which actually are good to help learning as well. My feel is a conversation that's gone along behind it is also very, very useful. So I think we established that it is a very good result. We noticed the speech and language therapy strand running through the report, which has been very useful. The child exploitation strand as well, and some more work we can bring onto that. We found out a bit more about the assessment tool and how it can be used and how the use of it can be improved. We've looked at the efforts how to reach outstanding. And what those efforts might be, and we had a bit of a conversation about the risk assessment and how that can be improved. So I think that's probably what we've done. So thank you very much for that report. Moving on then to item 7, which is, for that last one, we've noted the findings and the strengths and weakness areas for improvement. So we've done that. Item 7, the virtual school head teachers annual report. So this is the usual annual report, which Kelly Twitchen is going to introduce, I believe, who's the virtual school and college head teacher. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So you've all had an opportunity to look at the virtual school head teachers report for 21-22. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of highlights and draw your attention to those, and then open the floor to questions. So the report looks at all of our children in care to BCP in all of our schools, regardless of whether they are in BCP or outside of BCP, and regardless of their Ofsted rating. So just want to make that really clear to everybody. You'll see that we have the majority of our young people in good schools. We do have a percentage of our young people in schools that don't yet have an Ofsted rating. 78 in total, and 70 of those are in BCP. That doesn't mean that they are all in schools that have an Ofsted rating that is below good or outstanding. They are schools that have decided to change over and become academies, or move into a different academy trust. We have a number of schools that their previous Ofsted inspection is good, but they have decided to join an academy and therefore no longer have an Ofsted rating. we have 75 in outstanding scores, and you'll see we have a small number in requires improvement and serious weakness. We don't place children in requires improvement or those in serious weakness or special measures schools. They're children that have come into care already attending those schools. We wouldn't look to change a school for a young person coming into care just because of their Ofsted rating. Often school is the most stable place for our young people, and therefore we'd look to support that school with extra PPG funding, pupil premium grant, or additional visits from the team. We've had a number of young people coming into care, unaccompanied asylum seekers, and we've looked at various ways to support them with ESOL provision within our schools where appropriate, and also working with our colleges and post-16 providers. We've had no permanent exclusions for children in care for the 3rd year running, which is really great. We're working hard with our schools to make sure that none of our young people get to that point, and that we are in to schools supporting them as quickly as possible. 88% of our young people are progressing on to further education, which is excellent. And we've introduced the opportunity for all our young people to have access to Lexia, which is a reading programme. So based on the national data, and certainly after COVID, we saw a need for this. Lexia is very often used, is a programme that's used in schools, and it supports all age ranges, and also supports our UASC cohort as well. So a great resource that's accessible by all of our schools. Although it's only a small reduction, we have seen a reduction in suspensions for our children in care, and we'll continue to work on that. But we are less than the national average, which is promising. We've seen an increase in our grade 4 and above for GCSEs, English and Maths. Small, 8%, but it is an improvement nonetheless. And we've got priorities. We're still looking at improving our attendance and reducing our persistent absence, which will always be high on our agenda. I've included some quotes from Ofsted around our strengths as a virtual school. Ofsted saw us to be ambitious and have high aspirations for our children in care, a good understanding of our local schools. We were quick to identify children missing out on education and return them to school as quickly as possible. We've worked with other providers, creating bespoke courses for both our children, young people that are not in education, employment or training, or unaccompanied asylum seekers. This programme was nominated for an Employability Award in 2022, and they got to the last 4, which was a great success for them. We've provided a number of residential trips to Jamie's farm, which young people have thoroughly enjoyed, and there's some photos in there for you to see. We're still, as I said, working on our persistent absence, our attendance and our suspensions, and also looking at our attainment data, not on an individual basis, because that's looked regularly 3 times a year in personal education plan meetings by our teachers, but more on a strategic level, looking at where is the need, what do we need to put in place on that higher level rather than just individually. We've worked a lot on pupil voice. We've provided some training with partners, with colleagues in BCP, and also some Dorset schools as well look to join us, which is great. And we are ensuring now through our quality assurance process that we see our young people's voice being heard in those targets for education. We know that if we involve our young people in the target setting, they're far more likely to achieve. And that's what we'll be looking at moving forward when we look at the reviews of those targets and whether or not they've been met. If we look at our educational outcomes, so year 6 SATs, that's the end of Key Stage 2, so the year before they go to secondary school, we had 57% met our reading standards compared to 51% nationally, so we were above. We know that we need to look at writing, so we slightly differ from young people not in care, where the focus is very much on reading, and there's a need there. Our actual, when we looked at our year 6 results, our priority will be looking at supporting them in writing. So they're now our year 7 cohort that we're working with, putting in extra support around writing, ensuring that that's a real focus for schools when we go in to visit. And 43% met their maths standards, which is 1% below the national. And when we look at reading, writing and maths together, we were at 29% compared to 31% nationally. Our year 11 outcomes, we're very pleased with. We're very proud of our young people. 20% of our young people achieved English and maths at level 4 and above, compared to the last time examinations were sat in 2018-19, when our percentage was 12%. We compare to national as 5% higher and 7% higher than the Southwest. So we're really proud of our young people. They've done really well, and we're supporting them to go on to education, employment and training in a variety of forms, and keeping in touch with them to make sure that everything is going as it should do. We introduced over the last few years a touch base meeting during the summer holidays to make sure that our young people felt supported and that everything was in place ready for September. 10 of our year 13s last year went on to go, so they're now currently at university, which is great. And we had 4 students last year complete their degrees, 2 of which at master's level, which is a great success, and we're really proud of them as well. That's the highlights from the report. So I shall open up to some questions.
Well, thank you very much for that report. I mean, first of all, I think all of us would like to pass on the congratulations to those young people who did their degrees and masters. I know it takes a lot of doing, so I think we're all. Lisa, I think you were first.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just it was a really good report to read, and the way it was presented was it made it sort of more interesting and easily accessible. I'm just a bit confused because on the page 54, the first page, where we've got 78 unknown with Ofsted report, did I understand you saying that academies don't have to be inspected by Ofsted? Because I thought they did sort of every 4
Oh no,
years
they
or
do.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. So all it is that they haven't yet had their Ofsted.
Yeah.
So they will get one.
Thanks.
Zara.
So it was mentioned that there's quite a few absences, which is obviously to be expected, but it's briefly mentioned, but could you elaborate more on how we're planning on reducing these absences?
Yeah, sure. So I think when it comes to absence and attendance, there's probably a little bit of background to explain. So when we record attendance for children in care, we record attendance from the time that they come into care. So let's say, for example, a young girl comes into care. We'll call her Millie. So she comes into care, and the first day she's been, let's say, she comes into care in the month of May. She comes in, and on the Monday, she moves care placement. So she's come into care and she changes her care placement. So she doesn't go to school. The absence is authorised, as it should be. Millie attends school the rest of the week. Then the following week, Millie has her initial health assessment, which all children in care have. And that assessment's in the middle of the day. So she has a day off to undertake that assessment. Again, authorised absence. Out of 10 days, Millie's missed 2 days. Now, because we collect attendance data from the date that she came into care, we've already reduced Millie's attendance to 80%. So there's always a story behind attendance. Absolutely, there are times when attendance for our young people is not where it should be, and we work with that, and I'll go on to explain how we're doing that in a minute. but there is always a story around attendance, and there is always a need to look at the circumstances. We don't report attendance the same way that schools report attendance, because they will have the majority of their cohort will start in September and will finish in July. And so you'll have eventually a whole year's worth of attendance to report to. We don't always have that. But going on to look at the work that we're doing, so we work really closely with our partners in SEND, so that when a young person moves, which they do, and they do change care placements, and that young person has an education healthcare plan, we work together really hard to make sure that we get that young person back into school, because that impacts on our attendance. We know that there is a need for supporting young people around social, emotional, mental, especially mental health needs. So we're looking at working with mentors both in the BCP and also outside of BCP, so that they can support our young people where attendance is really being tricky for them. It's about identifying where the need is and what the problem is and what it is. So is it something at home? Is it something at school? And so we find somebody that can work with that young person to unpick that. We've also started to use postcards to acknowledge all those young people actually who have amazing attendance all year, and actually sometimes they get forgotten. So we've been congratulating our young people on those that have got great attendance all the way through the year, but also those that have made a real effort as well. And we do have young people that when we talk to them, they really do want to be in school more. And it's about making sure we've put some support in there, the right support in there. And so when they've made that huge improvement, or sometimes just a little bit of an improvement, then they also are getting a postcard and a bit of an acknowledgement. So it's about really celebrating those young people that are doing well and those that are working hard. But it's also about working with our partners, working with social workers, working with SEND, working with other local authorities when our young people move, to make sure they get back into school really, really quickly, so that they don't have a low attendance and they're not out of school for too long. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Does that, do you want to?
Yeah, that was
Oh.
wonderful. That was perfect. Thank you.
Right, thank you. It's Sandra first, and then Rob, I think.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I agree with my colleague that this is a very good report, and it's also easy and interesting to read, which is good. I am pleased that there's no permanent exclusions, as you said, for the third year running, but there are still a small number of suspensions, and I know this is going in the right direction, but do you have a breakdown of the need and the reason behind these suspensions? I'm assuming that you are, and I'm assuming that you're aware of the history behind all the suspensions, and you offer, presumably, support and advice to the schools along the way. But it would just be good if we were able to remove all the permanent, the suspensions as much as you can, as you have obviously removed the permanent exclusions. Is that doable, do you think?
We're working on it, Councillor Moore. We are definitely working on it. So and actually there's a bit of a two-pronged attack really. So we've got the virtual school that are obviously working at it in terms of children in care, but also more broadly we've got the inclusion service who are also looking at all of our schools and supporting our schools to try and reduce those number of suspensions for all our children in BCP. We have provided schools with a process, a bit of a flow chart, to give them some ideas around strategies to try, and ideas of how to de-escalate situations, but also at the point that actually when do we need to be contacted, so that we're making sure that our schools feel supported. We're also looking at different ways to use pupil premium as well, and working with schools around what else is out there that we can support. But it's about identifying that need again, and it's that curiosity. What is it? What do we need to do? And it's about being able to get in there early. So we've got good relationships with our schools. It's about making sure that they're not just coming to us when things have all gone wrong, that they're watching out for all those little signs that say actually something's bubbling here. So there's a bit of training as well. around our schools and offering schools training in terms of what to look out for, and making sure that they're telling us as soon as, and we're also asking those questions in those PEP meetings as well. So yes, lots of things going on, and we are really, that's a real focus for us in this academic year to get those suspensions down, because they do prevent our young people being in school, which obviously we don't want, but also it's not good for that young person either.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is it Mark next?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm interested on page 67 of the report about how pupil premium is being used by the schools. Do the schools just report to you how they're using the funding, or do you challenge and evaluate whether they're using it effectively and in a personalised manner for each individual in on who's in care? Thank you.
So our pupil education plan document is quite detailed. We use an electronic PEP system, which is quite common, and the majority of virtual schools in England use the same company that we do. When we set targets, we also link the targets have to link to the pupil premium. So schools set the targets with the young person, with us, social worker, foster carer, and they then have to link to that target what they want PPG for, and what if they haven't linked PPG to a target, then they're not given G. And then at the next meeting, we'll review the target, whether or not it's been met or not, but also what impact it's had in terms of PPG spent. They are absolutely all individual. So any money that's given to schools is all personalised to that young person, and is directly linked to the targets that are set in the education plan.
I think we actually had a discussion about that this time last year as well, which is quite interesting to see. I think there has been a couple of changes there, as at least since last year, on that.
We've our PEP system has become it, which means that we can actually run reports around what is spent, what it's spent on, and whether or not it's had an impact.
Thank you. Yeah, and Andy, I think you indicated next, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a couple of things that have already been said about what a great report it is. It's so engaging and it's so interesting to read. I think it should be mandatory for all reports to be presented in this way. So that's brilliant. Thank you for that. Superb. I just wanted to ask a little bit about the UASC children. Obviously, we supported 84 children from asylum-seeking children in BCP last year, and I wondered if that was, relatively speaking, a lot compared with other authorities, although you may not know that. I assumed, but I may be wrong, that most of them have come from Ukraine, and most importantly, I wondered how they had settled in and how they were doing, generally speaking. Thank you.
It's felt like quite a lot of young people. How it compares to other local authorities, I know that there are probably people on the call, or possibly in the room with you, that can answer that question better than I can. That 87 is not just school age, so that's also our post-16 cohort as well. We have a much smaller cohort of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in schools. And where we have got young people in schools, they are very much immersed into the education system with additional ESOL provision. So that's English for speakers of another language. So I talked about one of the programs that we helped set up in terms of post, which was a great success, and young people, I can't remember if we put pictures in of the young people. We did, yes. So we did. The young people really enjoyed it, and it set them up ready for when they were able to start college and begin their ESOL provision in a more formal way. The young people have been great to work with. We've now allocated a single officer to work with all our unaccompanied asylum seeking children, which has meant that officer can really get to know that cohort really well, and she's really enjoying getting to know the young people, and looking at where they want to go next. We had a visit to university at the end of in December last year, where we had a number of our UASC young people attend. They really want to go on and study at university, which is fantastic, and it's great to be aspirational. So we're having some great results from our young people, some great engagement, which is really positive. And we're working really closely with the college, BCP college, around ensuring that they've got everything they need to be able to continue to provide an ESOL course for them. They've agreed to have an additional start date in Easter, which is great. And we've also worked with colleges outside of BCP as well, who are also offering a great ESOL provision. So yeah, lots of work, but it's been really rewarding, and it's been great to do.
Great, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. You're happy with that, yeah? I've got a couple of questions. And first off, looking back at last year's report, and you mentioned it, we had no data last year, did we? We've got some data now, but of course it's quite difficult because it's a long time's gone past between the last lot of data and the data we've got now, and a lot of things have changed. It can, and having random data is never helpful. But you're the expert on this. Are there any patterns or anything that we'll be seeing with the data? Can we make any predictions, or is it really still at the moment we've only got 2 points on the graph and we can't see?
In terms of outcomes or attendance?
Yes. No, sorry, exam data I'm talking about. So I wasn't clear there, was I?
No, that's absolutely fine. There's a lot of data. I think it's no secret our young people really did fare well, as did all other children and young people across the country. In the majority, found that it was less stressful when you don't have to take an exam, and they were able to concentrate, and we did see much higher grades. But what's really good is that our young people have continued that into the year where they've had to sit examinations. I think the team have worked really hard. They worked tirelessly to make sure that our year 11s and our year 10s leading up to year 11 have had all the support they need. They've been really diligent at looking at where the needs are. Where do we need to target? Where are things not going so well? What can we put in place? What does the young person want? More importantly, what's the young person saying that they need? Listening to that as well is really important. So I think if we keep doing what we're doing, if we keep identifying early where the needs are, supporting the young people in terms of making sure that they feel ready for their exams and that they are they've got everything they need, then we should be able to carry on. But it isn't. There is no hard and fast rule, as you'll know, and you'll be fully aware of. Sorry, I'm sat in the town hall. I don't know if you can hear the Hoover. So yes, I don't know is the honest answer. I wouldn't like to predict what our next year's results will be, but we will continue what we've been doing in working with our young people to make sure that they achieve the very best they can for them.
Okay, so thank you for that. I would say, just for to make sure that other vacuum cleaning mates are available. Just so yeah, I would like to echo what people said. It's a really nice report to read. It was, yeah, it wasn't yeah, it was a lot of information there. Just was one thing. It's you know, you spot things. You mentioned on page 66, we're now using welfare call. Now I imagine you, yeah, other people in this room know exactly what that is, but I didn't know what that is. Can you explain to me what welfare call?
That's our PEP system. That's our electronic PEP system. So that is our all singing, all dancing system that will produce lots of information, and we'll be able to track when I talked about the pupil premium. So it's that system that we're using, and the analytics program.
So that is new to us and to you and BCP.
It's relatively new, and we've changed the package that we're using. So we've updated it. Okay,
and I'm guessing that the answer to the next question is that it is making a difference. It is giving an improvement.
So the difference it makes in terms of is massive. So moving away from a paper document, it is a huge efficiency, but also the data that you can collect by having an electronic document. It means that I can look. So here and now, I can look instantly and see what our current attendance is to date. I can see what our attainment and progress is. I can see which PEPs have happened today, which happened yesterday, which are due tomorrow. So it's instantly there. So in terms of management oversight, it's brilliant. But also in terms of looking at individually, it's also really good, and we can have that strategic oversight. So both operationally and strategically, it's a marked improvement.
Yeah, thank you. You said something there that you assumed that we all knew. You said you used to use paper documents, and now
sorry.
It's all, yeah. So straight away I can see a huge benefit. Yes. So thank you. Are there any other people? Oh yes, sorry, Lisa. I've just seen you there online. Hello, Lisa.
Yeah. Thank you. I was just interested in what you were saying about the data about attendance being up to date. Does that come from the college as well?
So we have just started to take attendance data from the college. It's quite new, but we are looking at our data, and we are at that data. So yes, it's at the moment our post-16 attendance data to date, and that's not just BCP College, Bournemouth and Poole College, sorry, is currently sitting at 90% for those young people that are engaging in a post-16 course. So yeah, but it's new, and we're still making sure that it's as accurate as it can be.
So would that be able to be shared? Would you know if you're a foster parent and the child has gone to the college, you think they've gone but don't turn up? Is there a way that then the foster parent would be able to be alerted to that? Is it that detailed and quick, or is that not in the capacity?
So they do, but it would be a quicker. The college will know before us, so we wouldn't be. The final checks are all done at the end of the week. So there are phone calls done throughout the week, but you've got your final check at the end. So no, it's not quite that sophisticated. It does still involve phone calls and people phoning, not us. That's one of what that's part of the contract with Welfare Call. But we could certainly if there's a foster carer that wanted to talk about attendance, we've certainly got a very accurate picture of what their attendance looks like, and we can go back and look at days where they didn't attend historically, but we couldn't alert a foster parent on the day. We wouldn't necessarily know.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, if I just follow that one up slightly in that case, because that's quite interesting, because within a school, because it's normally the school who makes that contact, isn't it? So within a school, if a child isn't at school and they've not had a call from the parent, because all schools have these absence lines, don't they? There's somebody in the school, well, a number of people in the school per year group, who then start making phone calls to parents to say your child isn't in school today. Can you explain why? But do the college do that, or because I'm suggesting that bit is covered normally by the school, not virtual school.
Yeah.
But is it different in sixth form?
I think there is. I don't know the answer to the question. We can certainly find out. I know that there is more of a reliance on the young people to attend. So there is so that jump from school to college, part of that is around being independent. So I'm not sure what the college's policy is around informing carers or any parents whether or not they've attended that day or what their attendance is. I'd have to go back and talk to colleagues at the college, but I do know that there is more of a focus on that young person being more independent. But I totally see where you're coming from in terms of when we're talking about children in care specifically, there may be a need for that extra support. And we monitor attendance not on a daily basis, but we monitor attendance, and any anomalies are discussed at team meetings. So any young people that we think, as a manager, that looks a little bit strange, that's out of the ordinary, or if there is a trend using the system, we can look at that, and we can then take that to the team meeting and let individual officers and teachers know so that they can take that back and discuss it further.
Yeah. I'm just going to look at Lisa just in case what I said is triggered any further question from you. But
I think I do have some, because I've had experience myself of my own children going to the college and getting a phone call straight away if they're late, even.
Okay.
Whereas with a child I know who's an unaccompanied asylum seeker, there is no automatic phone call. And I would say out of the two, it's needed much more for the child in care. And I was interested in.
I can certainly take that back and look at that. I think it would be really interesting to see what the college policy is and who they're phoning as well. So I think that's a really good point for me to take away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just looking to check there's no other questions at all anywhere. No. In that case, I'll just try to sum up, because we've had quite a varied discussion on this one, and as always. So we've talked about reductions in absences and looking at the stories between each absence and understanding them. We've looked at suspensions and how we can reduce them to zero. And what advice is being given to schools and helps given to schools to help that occur. We've had a discussion about the pupil premium money and how that is now tracked and how it is made sure that it is spent in an agreed way with the pupils. Unaccompanied asylum seekers numbers has been taught, and English as additional language support for them. We've talked a bit about exam data, attendance data from the college, and the new piece of software, welfare call. I think that sort of sums up what we've talked about. Well, thank you very much for that report. As I said, it was, again, very interesting. We're now on to agenda item 8, the SEND improvement journey, the SEND capital programme and delivering better value. This is on 71 to 92 on the reports. So this is one of our recurring items, but with a focus, how we can monitor progress after the Ofsted report. And I'd like to welcome Sarah Rempel, Director of Education and Skills, to present the report. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand over to Tanya Smith in a minute. I'm just going to set the scene behind the Delivering Better Value project. So the programme is designed to provide both support and funding to local authorities with substantial deficit in their high needs blocks. We are one of 55 local authorities that are taking part in the first cohort. So we are one of the first few, I think it was 5 local authorities who should be getting their bid back in March. This is all set against the escalating deficit in the dedicated schools grant, and it's for us, it's part of our written statement of action work and our high needs block recovery plans. So Tanya's going to briefly pick out some of those, the highlights of the bid and how this sits alongside our SEND capital programme. Thank you, Tanya.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, this is the culmination really of 6 to 7 months worth of work. The diagnostics has identified issues that we know and love as part of our work and the written statement of action and our transformational programme. Namely, we've got to reduce spend on independent non-maintained specialist places, and secondly, to support more children in mainstream schools. So that's what loosely comes out of this diagnostic. There's a whole load of interesting facts, stats and details that sit behind the bid to provide a robust evidence base to guarantee and reassure us that we're on the right track with the opportunities identified as part of this diagnostic work. So there's 5 opportunities that have been identified. We've organised those opportunities into 4 work streams, and the work streams are around reducing growth in EHCPs and supporting more children on SEND support, supporting more children in mainstream schools and de-escalating need, if you like, from EHCP plans. And then the 3rd one is around planning capacity in our state maintained schools. That's our programme of expansion, and a presentation is attached to outline progress of that programme. And then the 4th work stream is around reviewing our EHCPs, both for mainstream schools and special schools. The bid that we've put together identifies the actions necessary to achieve the savings opportunities, the benefits, if you like, which are set out as both annualised and cumulative savings. So, for instance, the annualised savings are in the region of 5k per year, and that's a target saving of 5k per year. And our targets have been assessed based on our capacity and our capability to actually save that money. There are stretch targets, and that would produce an annualised saving in the order of 12k. There are details in the report of what the 5-year savings could look like, and they're between 9.7 and 33.7k. If they differ slightly from what's in the report, that's because we're working on it behind the scenes, and the numbers are being refined as we go. Our bid at the moment is in a sort of pre-finalised state. We're just waiting for some last minute bits of feedback. The money we would access would be a total of £1 million, and we've set out in the bid how we'd spend that. And we'll hear, as Sarah said, shortly, and begin and have access to that money from the 1st of April. So it's exciting times. It will really help improve and increase the pace of our work, particularly in respect of the reviews of EHCPs, well, all of the opportunities and work streams really. The presentation just clarifies for you that we're working across 4 tranches of projects. We delivered tranche 1 for September 22-23. We're now in the process of developing schemes as part of tranche 2, which will provide places from September 23 onwards. And of course, we're also working in the background towards the development of the more major schemes, which are in tranche 3. Tranche 3 and 4 just say are subject to review following the outcome of our special school bids to the DFE, which we're waiting to hear from. I know there's a lot of information contained in that report, and the technical details is a bit heavy in places, but you've probably all read it, and I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Okay, if I can just start going on this one then, just to get a look at an overview, just please correct me, stop me and say if any of these things would have sort of summed it up here or incorrect. So there's basically nationally there's 3 levels of intervention. There's safety valve, the delivering better value, and then there's the education and skills funding agency working with some authorities. 14 LAs on safety valve, something like that, including Dorset. We are on the 55 on delivering better value. Now the LEs, the local authorities can choose to opt in or out, so they can decide not to go along this route because no, it's not for me, but BCP have chosen to go. But you can't choose which of the 3 levels that you want to opt into. So you're addressed. You say this is where you're at. Take this or leave it, basically. And we've got a current cumulative deficit target. What target now? Likelihood by 27, 28 of 300 million, which is a scary number, isn't it? Which is more than a BCP's total annual budget, isn't it? So yeah, it's the sort of number you have to say quite quickly without. And at the moment it's being rolled over, and looking at this general, you're looking, if it all works, saving about 29 million in the 5 years, which is about 10%. So the first question, is, have I said anything that's not quite right there? Is that sort of, that's my
That was a really good summary, Chair. Yes. Right.
Yeah, because it is quite complicated, isn't it, to see what. So at the moment it's being rolled over. If everything works, we take this, the bid works, we save what the target is, 29 million in 5 years. Yeah, that's a big help, but it's not the whole thing, is it? What do we know what happens then?
So, well, and that's certainly a question that our Section 151 officer is seeking the answer to. So this won't address the entire deficit. This will look at reducing the growth of that deficit. And like you've pointed out, 29 million out of nearly 300 million isn't a lot, but it's still 29 million. And of course, it will support our send improvement work across the local area. So in terms of what will happen with the deficit, we don't know yet. And that is certainly some of the questions that the current government are being asked about how they're going to address that going forward. Just as a reminder, these deficits are built up because of the changes in the 2014 reforms, where local authorities have to do much more for a bigger cohort of children, and up until the age of 25 now.
Okay, we got a few, and I think Sandra just beat Lisa there.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I very much hope that this bid is going to be successful. And as you said, it isn't going to cover the growing deficit, but it is also 29 million less. So you've got to go through it. You've got to try. You've got to do all sorts of things in order to do it. But can I just ask, or 2 questions actually? As I understand it, it was that the government did put out a green paper which did recognise the financial problems that were being faced by councils for all the reasons that you've said, the age range increasing, the HCPs and all the rest of it. What happened to the green paper? Is it happening, or is it delayed, or is it sort of like not existing anymore?
We haven't heard yet. We're going to get some updates, and I know, Helen, you were at a meeting recently. We're going to get some updates. I think May, was that right, Helen? Was it March?
March is what they said would be very optimistic, so we can anticipate. It's called the SEND implementation guidance, and it will be a package of improvement tabled around what the green paper incorporated. So any time between March and May.
Right, thank you for that. That's so it's not completely dead. So that's positive. That's good. Can I also ask about the 2 free school bids? When are we likely to hear about those?
Tanya?
Yeah, so the DFE did anticipate that all local offers heard by now. There is some delay at the DFE, so it's any day soon, I'm told.
Yeah, another watch this space. Yeah, that's good though. At least it's, you know, we haven't lost it. We may well, you know, be able to have at least one. So that's good. That's okay. Positive in the right direction.
Right.
Thank you,
Lisa.
Thanks, Chair. I think my question's pretty much been answered, really. No, that's fine. But I just sort of, I'm left feeling that we have to do, there are things we have to do by law and should be doing, and it's not certain that we'll be able to afford to do them, which is really concerning. Thank you.
Zara, I think you were saying.
Hi, so this is kind of more of a comment, but we've done a lot of surveying and talking with young people in the BCP area, and especially in schools, Senko seem to be quite like struggling, especially when it comes to like financials and staffing and stuff. So I just want to say that this, like, as a whole, it can make a really huge impact, and I'm really glad to see it happening, especially as it's really applicable to my campaign. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Right. Thank you. So I've got a couple of questions. So I'll tell you what, Emma, I'll come to you first. Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I think it's a really good report and a really good plan. I just have one question. With the aim of getting some of these students into mainstream provision, will there be any financial impact on the schools in question, or will the cost of those places in mainstream school be fully covered by the funding that's available here?
Sorry, can you clarify, in mainstream schools for children with the HCPs?
Yeah, so it was my understanding from the report that the plan was to put more of these students into mainstream schools, potentially in like resource bases, rather than into special provision. And I just wanted to understand whether the full cost of that would be supported by this plan, or whether or not those schools would be picking up some of that cost.
Thank you for clarifying. So children with an EHCP, and Helen, please do come in, there is supported by funding. So we've recently changed the amount of funding that we're giving to schools. So we've actually increased the funding that mainstream schools get for their children with EHCPs.
And certainly this alludes to the legislation we currently work within, where the presumption is mainstream, and as Tanya will support, the more special school places we build, the more special school places that we are going to fill. And there is a place for special schools linked to parental preference, of course, but there is a big push to have as many young people working at SEND support level supported within mainstream, and then those who need to benefit from an education healthcare plan working with our colleagues in school around the graduated response and making cost of provision maps to make sure we're delivering what the young people should have. And that could be anything from occupational therapy to speech and language therapy, incorporated with what's in their plan. And as Sarah's correctly highlighted, that's linked to the new banding system that we're currently implementing. And that banding system was agreed by a working party with multiple stakeholders.
Would you like to follow that up?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I agree, but I think we also do need to recognise that often, or sometimes, that banding doesn't cover the cost to the schools of supporting those students properly.
And that's why we had our consultation to increase the banding, so that on the highest level of banding, it would cover the cost of, for example, a one-to-one teaching assistant.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could, because that actually comes with one of the questions I was just going to ask, actually, because this is opportunity one, isn't it, on the sheets, talking about SEND support resulting in need for fewer EHCPs, an annualised 5-year cumulative saving of around 1 million, which is good to hear. Echoing what you're saying, because I did a bit of reading around this, and in one of the education unions we're talking about the risk on this, and I'm going to quote from them, and I can't remember which one it was. Is this result in increased pressure on parts of the school and educate other parts of the school and education system? So I think that sort of is now. I feel we've probably got an answer. We hope not. I think, but I know. Yeah, the alarm bells ringing, aren't they? But with all this, looking at one of the other opportunities, which just excuse me, I'll just opportunity 4, the annual review backlog, savings benefits, the confirmed work in progress. Can you explain how how did you actually get the savings from the annual review backlog being cleared?
Yeah, so we've got a backlog of about, is it 1,800, Helen, at the moment? And so the effect that backlog has on things like our business support officers, the email traffic coming through, has a knock-on effect with capacity in the team. So by removing that backlog, actually the processes work a lot more efficiently, and business support will be able to focus on our timeliness. So our timeliness should increase of, for example, getting plans out on time. So by removing that backlog, it should have an impact on the efficiency of the service.
Right, thank you. That's very interesting. It's because it wasn't what I thought the answer was going to be, which is really really good. And because there's also a backlog with actually producing EHCPs, isn't they? Probably do, because one of the things I think is mentioned here is that some of this money will be used to hopefully employ more educational psychologists to help. That will help with both those backlogs, I believe. Is there a risk? No, I don't think the risk is quite the right word, but is there a possibility that when that backlog gets cleared, it will result in more EHCPs coming through the system?
It alludes to the previous point you made around us trying to potentially do education healthcare plans that we're issuing by making good use of the graduated response and having our educational psychologists going into school and doing traded work around supporting young people with special educational needs that don't necessarily need to be supported by the legal document that is an education healthcare plan. And with regard to the clearing of the annual review system, we're also updating our current case management system to make it more efficient. At the moment, we have some tasks being allocated to case officers, some to business support, some being lost in the ether of a general email outbox. Therefore, we are streamlining our processes to make that much more efficient, and that should, one, reduce the backlog of annual reviews, but also let us separate the wood from the trees and work on potentially reducing the number of educational healthcare plans that it's not actually necessary to work with by supporting our young people at the SEND level within school.
Okay, thank you. And just again, thinking if, you know, I can see why these are advantages here. If an educational health and care plan isn't viewed as suitable by the parent carers, and that they have a right of appeal, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that can go through the court system, which I imagine is very costly. If it does, when it goes to the court system, if it does, and I imagine a number do, I can guess, the finances for paying for that legal system, does that come from children's services, or does it come off the children's services budget, or does it come from another area of budget?
For the parents putting through for the appellant's appearance, or for the local authority defending appeals?
I'm thinking for the local authorities' costs is what I'm particularly thinking about at the moment, because that's sort of what we're focusing on.
That comes from our budget, but actually Helen's team have really successfully reduced the number of appeals going through and resolved cases. Helen, I don't know if you wanted to give some facts about that.
By employing 2 qualified solicitors into our appeals and tribunals team, and by them working very closely with Sendias, our arm's length organisation which support parents and carers, we have significantly reduced costs for mediation, which is a prerequisite before you go to the full-blown appeal. We don't use external services as routinely as we did historically. In the last year, I think we've reduced our budget from something like £97,000 to somewhere in the region of 30,000, and that's the cost of working with the parents to try and achieve an outcome that doesn't need a legal resolve. But when it does get to that stage, actually going with a robust case, the national statistics is that local authorities generally lose 97% of appeals. I think it's about 3% where we're successful. The other 97%, the tribunals tend to work in favour of parents. The last appeal that we took to court, or were taken to court to defend, we actually won. The judge found in favour of BCP. So that's one area of success for us. And it's not something we routinely want to get involved in with parents. It's in everyone's best interest to work together for the best outcome for the children and young people. Yeah. But case law states that we don't need to provide the Rolls Royce of education, that we need to provide an appropriate education. And sometimes that's where things can become complex and difficult and challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree that the ideal is that these never happen. It's, you know, it all gets sorted out, and it's all in the best interest of the child, and it doesn't have to go.
Absolutely.
So you said we're employing some solicitors to help with this, with giving advice, and again that comes out of the children's services budget, that their employment.
So we're actually employing the solicitors Helen was talking about are actually employed as officers rather than as a solicitor. They have that legal, not just, but they have a legal background. So we're really fortunate to have them in our team. We are actually employing, or the legal are employing a solicitor that will specialise in education and send for us, which will support us further, and that will come out of our budget. Yes. But again, that's to reduce the legal costs. So, for example, during those tribunals, we have to go out, outsource legal costs. Actually, it's much cheaper to have our own in-house solicitor.
Yes, I imagine it is. Are there any other questions following on from that? I know I've been talking quite a lot on this one. I don't have ignored anybody. Okay, in that case, if we've got no other questions, I'll try to sum up, because I've got a few notes here for the summing up. First off, we did a quick recap of the overview of this, and rather than, if you want me to send it to Louise, I will do, rather than you have to type it. We talked about the green paper and what might happen, and the timescale on that. We've talked about the free school bids and how they are progressing, both here and nationally. We talked about the annual review of backlog. We talked about the appeals and the new team. And we also talked about, before that, the knock-on effects within schools in education, and how that can be mitigated. I don't think I missed anything else there. I'm just looking around to see if anybody's shouting at me. No, in that case, I think that's we can move on from that. I don't think we've got to. Yeah, we're just noting that one, really, aren't we? So we're now on to agenda item 9, the Children's Services Improvement Plan Year 1. So it's another recurring item with a different theme for each meeting. And we're going to ask Rachel now this particular, we only had some paperwork on this actually just today, didn't we? So on this one, normally I say assume that all the members of the committee have read it. But I think on this one, we say assume that most members of the committee won't have read it because I mean, I had a quick look at it when it came to this afternoon, and I know a number of us might have been working. So assume that it hasn't been read if you see what it be for a change.
Thank you, Chair. It's because it's a presentation that it's come through today. And the improvement plan, which you've also got a copy of, needs to go through our own quality boards. And the timing of that meant it was later coming to yourselves. Okay.
Thank you. Yep.
Are you happy for me to start?
Yes, please do. Yes.
Okay, so we've got a presentation today. It's 1 year since Kathy joined us. And so we thought it was very timely to give you an update at this meeting of 1 year on working through our improvement plan. It's also 1 year since in April since our DFE advisor joined us. So it felt quite timely to do this rather than the usual themed update that we give you. So all of SLT are here tonight, so we've got various parts of the presentation to do depending on our areas of responsibility. If you remember from the ILACs, this is just a reminder of the 7 areas that which they identified needed to improve in that December 2021 visit. You'll all be very familiar with those, so I'll not go through them individually. But you'll they were the basis of what our improvement plan was built on and the basis of how we worked through our improvement journey. We identified this time last year key priorities for the local authority in 21-22. Those are listed again. These will be very, very familiar to you. I'll just pick a few out. So it was about the corporate landscape and LGR pay and reward, which impacted quite significantly on our ability to recruit and stabilise our workforce. They told us that our quality assurance system wasn't good enough. We had obviously had a written statement of action. We had we didn't have a permanent leadership and management team. We were working on 2 integrated care systems, Mosaic and Care Director at that point. There were some queries about the data and information that we were using, and our partnerships were being queried and how we worked with our internal partners sort of corporately, and also our external partners, the police, health, schools, etc. So I'm sure they're all very familiar to you. Oops, sorry, press the wrong button. So we've split this presentation into the areas covered through an Ofsted inspection, and you'll see this is the leadership and management section. I'm not going to go through each of the demands and challenges again. They'll be very, very familiar to most people that are in this room today. But our key strengths and developments I'd like to just share with you. We now have one system in place as our integrated care system. So Mosaic went live very, very recently, but it is one system now. So it went live on the 23rd of January, and Care Director is no more, and it will make such a difference to our social workers working on the front line, and also the way we can keep our information and safeguard our children and young people. Pay and reward, as you know, our paid social work staff was lower than our neighbouring authorities, who were all either good or outstanding. So we were losing social workers alongside having our inadequate judgment, as well as a low pay grade. We were losing social workers at rate knots, really, and having to support our service through agency workers. We have been successful back in December in agreeing a pay award for social work staff, and I'm pleased to say that that was introduced on the 1st of January, and we're already reaping the benefits of that through a new recruitment campaign, and have interviews every week now for those applicants that come through, so we can jump on the bandwagon quickly with regards to interviews. So if somebody applies for a job, if somebody submits an application form on a Tuesday, they would be interviewed that Friday if they were available to attend. So yeah, so making a big difference. We started that two weeks ago. We've now got a quality assurance framework, so we developed the quality assurance framework that we wanted. We've implemented it, and we are now embedding it across the service. It'll take a little time to embed across the whole service, but there are some really good green shoots coming through, and I'm pleased to say that the results of embedding that quality assurance framework shows that we're sort of quite firmly with regards to the quality of practice in an RI position. So we are definitely moving out of inadequate. We've got a really strong training offer, so we've had a look at the training offer over the last year. Our sector-led improvement partners, who are Hampshire, have been and looked at all of our training, and in some cases have described it as outstanding. So we've got a really robust training offer for our social work staff. We've got practice fundamentals, which are the basics. They're sort of trainings. They are training packages lasting an hour and a half to 3 hours, depending on the topic. And all of our social workers are expected to go on that alongside their induction and training within 6 months. We've got a new governance framework in place, which with improved accountability across the service. So that holds all of us at whatever tier that we're working in within children's services accountable for the work that we do. And there's a big framework around that. Hence the reason the improvement plan and any updates that we make to that has to go through the checks of those quality boards and improvement governance. We've got a progress forum, which is a staff-led group for staff, by staff, and I'm pleased to say that they are reporting an improving culture within children across children's services. I've held several staff group meetings with different groups of staff since Christmas, and we're asking them what makes them stay in BCP, what makes them stay with children's services, and obviously pay is number one, but unanimously across all the groups that we have is the people. So they're all referring to their work colleagues as really good, sound people to work with, which I think is really, really nice to hear from where we were sort of 18 months, 2 years ago. We've implemented a caseload strategy, and we are reducing our caseloads. And again, that will help with our recruitment, because we will be able to promote that when we go out, when we're out recruiting new staff. And the majority of the time we're meeting that. We've still got some work to do on that, but most of the time we are meeting our caseload numbers as average across different numbers across different teams, and staff have actually reported that as an improving picture to our Ofsted colleagues. Monitoring visits and DFE advisors have shown a confidence in the leadership team. So we've got a stable SLT and service manager team, moving down to recruitment of team managers, but there is some confidence, a lot of confidence in that. We've just had a Children's Services Improvement Board today, which again has gone well, which fills us with more confidence within our improvement journey. Next steps you can see there, where we've got a practice model to implement. We're just talking to the DFE about funding that and how we're going to do that. We're launching a Children's Services Vision, and we'll bring that probably to your next overview and scrutiny to share that with you, designed by our workforce. And we've got some work to do on closing the learning loop. So we've got the quality assurance framework introduced, and lots of different things that we learn from across the service, CSPRs and that type of thing. We've just got to get a bit more confident at closing that learning loop. We're really promoting developing a learning culture and the training that we've got available, and really encouraging staff to take time out to go to attend their training, and give them the permission and the space in order to do that. We need to improve supervision and management oversight. We know that's an area of weakness, but we've got a strategy in place to be able to do that, to make sure all of our children and young people are safeguarded. And we continue to strengthen our partnerships with health and our corporate colleagues. And we've just done an event with our director strategy group about how we all work together as one council for our children and young people. We'll continue with the recruitment and retention of social workers. Corporately, other departments are pledging how they will work with our children and young people, understanding their role as a corporate parent and what that means and understanding what that means within their services. And we're supporting, obviously, the corporate wellbeing policy in order to support our staff in the retention of them within our particular service. So those are the main leadership and management areas of improvement against the Children's Services Improvement Plan. I'll hand over to my colleague Juliette, who's on the screen, to take us through safeguarding and early help.
Good evening, everyone. Just to carry on from where Rachel took us up to, it has been a bit of a journey, but would appreciate. In terms of the strengths, and again, I'll do what Rachel has done, concentrate on the strengths initially. Youth Justice Service obviously delivered earlier in terms of how well they have done, and that is something we should be blowing our trumpet about. Our Educare service is a service that works with probably our most crisis situations where families are likely to break down. We have 100% success rate in keeping children at home with parents when we use the Educare service, so that's a real positive for us. And it's something that we want to build on and expand the remit of that team and how it functions within BCP. We've listened to our staff and the staff feedback around domestic abuse, which we know was something that was identified by Ofsted when they came in 2021, if I'm right. And in terms of the work we've done around that, so the staff was saying they needed more confidence around speaking to children who have been exposed to domestic abuse, working with perpetrators, and also working with the victims when they go out to visit families. So we commissioned a bespoke programme through research and practice, and that is being delivered to our staff currently. It was started in December. It's also occurred in January. And that's a massive step forward for us in terms of making sure that our staff have the confidence and skills they need to deliver. We have done quite a lot of work around thresholds and looking to make sure that the application threshold is consistent throughout the whole of the services. We still have work to do on that, but in terms of feedback from the SLIP when they've looked at our work, so for aren't aware, there are the partners, Hampshire County Council, who support ourselves in terms of our improvement journey, but also feedback from Ofsted was around the consistency there we're seeing within the strategy meetings that are held and the thresholds being applied within those. We now have a tracking system for our court work. So PLO is public law outline. So it's the very start of a court process, or when we're considering whether or not we need to enter court. We follow a very strict outline of what we need to do and in what order. So we have a tracking system for that now, which ensures that there's no delays within the court work. The timeliness of work within MASH is extremely strong and has been, well, it's been for at least 7 months, if not longer. So it's really consistent. And we have currently a contextual system, and they deliver, again, that work at those real crisis points for our children to make sure that they're best supported. So there's lots of positives. We're also creating various policies and guidance that help our staff to deliver consistent practice. And if we look at the next steps, which is on the side, it's also around that. So we want every child to have the best service at the right time, but we also want to make sure that it doesn't matter when you pick up the phone, you will still get the right service at the right time. So a lot of the work's been done around the consistency in terms of practice and also the quality within that. We have currently got a early help and partnership lead in place who is looking at our early help offer and also how we deliver early help services, and also how the communities and our partners deliver early help services to our children, which will create a more cohesive system right across. And we're just working really, really hard to embed the best practice for our kids. There's some other work that's happening around something called practice standards, which is basically where we set the expectations for staff of what we want for children. But that will also allow parents and children to look and say, well, what can we expect from staff, which I think will be really beneficial. And within that, it's also it's bringing the child to life and making sure. So there's a lot of terminology that you'll hear mention things like cases. Well, actually, they're children. You know, they're not cases. They're children. So going back to actually what it is we do, and we deliver services to children. So I think some of the language we use, we're working on a culture of change in that round, making sure that children come first, making sure that some of the language we use is more I'll say child friendly, but I say that for good reason. So I've heard mention of placements, but actually these are children's homes. So we need to talk about homes, not placements, children, not cases. And those are the things that we're looking at within the practice standards. So we have that expectation across the whole of the service. I'm just going to pass on to Sarah to deliver on the corporate parenting.
Thanks, Juliet. For those people, and probably most of you in the room don't know who I am, so I'm just going to introduce myself quickly. I'm Sarah Scully. I'm Interim Director for Corporate Parenting and Permanency, and I joined BCP on the 5th of December last year, so relatively new into role. So thank you. So just following on really from colleagues in regards to looking at our key strengths and development over the past 12 months. So one of the areas that was picked up on in the inspection was ensuring that our young people leaving care had access to their health records. So in terms of pulling that together, we've called those health passports, making sure that our young people have that history. It's really important, as everyone I'm sure will agree, that we all have that access to our childhood illnesses, etc., immunisations and everything else that would be included in that. In terms of our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, we have now a commission service to ensure that when they come into our care, that they have those initial health assessments or screenings for those children. That's really important. And I'm sure that it will have been discussed and promoted, and you've probably tracked the journey in relation to our Care Leaders Hub that opened in August 2022. It's a really valuable resource for our young people, and the use of the hub is growing. And we are looking in terms of working with partnerships in terms of what we may develop and services that we may offer from our hub to promote the well-being of our young people as well. So it's a real positive addition to our services. We've heard earlier from Kelly, our head of our virtual school, around the use of personal education plans for children that are in our care. The quality assurance processes around these have improved, and we are monitoring in terms of the completion of PEPs, but also the standard of information completed within those documents. And I think most importantly, and kind of picking up on what Juliet was saying, the voice of the child is included within those documents, and actually within all of the work that we do. We have continued to ensure that a high proportion of children in care are living with our in-house foster carers. So at the end of December, we had 345 children living locally with our foster carers out of a cohort of, I think it was 520 children in care. So that's a really it's really important that we celebrate that. It's a really strong picture in respect of the support that our foster carers are offering, but also the ability to keep our children local as well. We now have 90% of our supported lodging carers have been approved as foster carers. So that's a really good news story in the sense that we can offer more foster homes for our children. However, we may need to go back and recruit supported lodgings carers as well, because there's still a need for us to have that option in terms of move on accommodation for young people. The launch of the AQA scheme, so that's a programme of support for young people in regards to getting them ready for independent living. That is becoming more and more embedded in practice. And again, just to go back to the use of PEPs, we've extended our offer now for young people who are in year 14 as well. So that's really positive. In terms of areas for development and next steps, we need to have a consistent and improved health offer for all of our children and young people. So working alongside partners to make sure that children's emotional well-being and health needs are met and promoted alongside those physical health needs as well. So we've still got a way to go in regards to reaching our goals for that, but work is ongoing. We want to develop a young person's website so that they can access up-to-date information, you know, keeping ahead of the times in terms of technology. I think that's a key priority for us. You'll have heard my colleagues talk about the voice of the child, and that has to underpin all of our practice in regards to understanding their experiences, but also using and listening to their experiences to develop our social work practice. It's important and it's a priority in terms of achieving permanence, so making sure that all of our children in care have secure and stable homes. And looking at placement sufficiency as well. So this isn't just an issue for BCP, it's an issue across the country in regards to suitable homes for children and for young people as well. We are continuously working with providers, looking at what we can do differently to ensure that we've got choice for children and young people that need to be looked after by ourselves. We do have a small number of children that are placed with unregistered providers, and we are continuing to look for alternative suitable homes for those children, homes that are approved by Ofsted in terms of their inspection regime. Again, that's not unique to BCP. It is an issue countrywide, but we recognise and are absolutely determined to find registered placements for these children. There's some further work to do around our management and support of our unaccompanied asylum seeking children. So at the end of December 2022, we had 55 children under the age of 18 who we were looking after. So it's about 10% of our total cohort. So making sure that we've got robust systems in place to meet their needs is a key priority. And then finally, again, and this message around consistency sticks out for me in regards to our next steps and our key priorities. It's having a consistent approach to risk analysis and risk management.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Just really to tie all that up, but also look at what the key priorities for the next year, but also just in terms of moving forward. You remember from John Coughlin's letter, there was a lot around that corporate engagement and supporting children's services in the landscape in which it sits. And obviously we have done some engagement work just recently, as Rachel outlined, in terms of how can they help and support children's services, and there was a really good and supportive response, but we need to take that further. Workforce stability, there is stability beginning to happen through the leadership team, but we now need to do that through team managers and then on to social workers. We've still got services where we're still at 85% agency staff and turnover, and so that presents a risk. I would say the stability though of those agency staff is probably greater than it was a year ago. We really would want to develop a learning culture, and it's enabling people to understand what that feels like and what that means. This isn't a blame culture, it's about how we learn from the things that we may not always get right and how we move forward, and enabling the teams to feel that that as a leadership team through the system we will hold people when things may not go that well, but we will hold them and actually look at whether how we do things differently together. We will continue to look at caseloads to make sure that we have not only reduced them, but they're the right, there's a thing called case weighting, and making sure that we've distributed cases right. Quality assurance, obviously we've got probably at the moment compliance, am I visiting a child? Yes, tick. Well, actually, what does that mean? What is it that you're doing? What does that look like? And what is the impact and outcome? And that's what we'll move on to as we go forward. Leadership and management, as I said, making sure that we all understand the tasks at hand, what that is to deliver, what that looks like. You may see in some of the quality assurance work that we've got, that we've put into the system, it talks a lot about maybe a lack of oversight and management. Or even if you've got oversight and management, again, it's around, well, what does that mean? What's the impact? And how are you supporting that worker to do the job, which then leads to good outcomes for children and families. So more to do in that space. We do have a written statement of action, and we do need to not forget that. And obviously that again, we need to make sure that in tandem with the Children's Social Care Improvement Plan that we work and support the written statement of action, because a lot of the children and young people within that written statement of action with EHCPs are also our children in care. We are also developing our partnerships. If we recall, the Ofsted report in December 21 said that there was adversarial relationships with some of our partners. I think they related that to health. And we've worked very hard to develop some of those relationships, but we have more to do in that space as to what it is that we can contribute to as children, but also what they can contribute to us and assist us on this journey. So there's more to do in that area. And so, in essence, to sum it up, really, we are wanting to promote a continuous learning, development, and improvement through strengthening practice. And we talked about the practice model that we're putting a bid in for the DFE, but also through our reinforcement through the leadership and management of how do we do things around here and what's expected of people, and how we enable that practice to happen, which enables good outcomes for children and families. Developing champion a culture where everyone takes accountability through high support, high challenge approach, and listen to our children and families. And you've heard my colleagues talk very much about gaining the views of children and young people and their families to make sure that we're delivering the services based on those, and that we understand what is it like to grow up and live as a child and young person and family in BCP, and what does that mean? So, and obviously we have on the right-hand side the duty of optimism that we can move forward and we can get things right and have a positive attitude. So that's a kind of whistle-stop tour. I wasn't quite sure I was going to be able to say that to the improvement plan a year on.
Well, first off, thank you very much for that. There was a lot of information there. Just a couple of things from me. Sorry, Sarah, very remiss of me not to welcome you at the beginning. Yeah, you are welcome. Thank you very much for attending the committee, and I would also say happy anniversary. I should have bought a cake, shouldn't I? I shan't say, is it, wow, where did that was a year ago, or have I only been here a year? So I don't know which answer that is, but I shall. I'm assuming it's the first one. The mosaic going live on 23rd of January. That sounds. I think that those of us who were here right at the beginning of BCP Children, I think the first meeting of Children's ONS nearly 4 years ago, this was discussed, and it brings a certain something to our souls to realise that maybe now we've actually got there. Yeah, I might ask a question on that in a minute, if that, because I know there's a couple of other. And one thing that is noted, we've got an early health improvement plan sent out with this document at the same time, didn't we? Which is 20 odd pages. Now, I will suggest that if anybody's got any questions on that, now's not the time to ask them. What we could do is maybe direct any questions to Louise and myself, and we can send that out, which will be good. Susan, yeah.
It's been mentioned a few times this evening about caseloads and aiming at lowering caseloads per active person. What is the optimum that you're looking, where from to? Because I do remember a figure that was actually given, I think, about 4 years ago, and I know that staff were very much under strain and stress, especially when I had to go to court to represent and be at the courts, because it can take a few days out of the work situation. So I've always been concerned about the stress caused to officers. Thank you.
And caseloads, I will refer to my colleague in a moment. Caseloads are dependent on the team that you're in, depends on how many you could or couldn't carry. So not every team will have the same across the piece. When I arrived, we did some work about what might be an acceptable caseload. I mean, I think there's a difference from where we were, what we were trying to aim for, and where we'd like to go next. And a lot of that is about stabilising staff, but also to have enough staff in the system, but also getting our processes right. And so there were some teams when a year ago had caseloads of 35, 45, and we're now in a better position. But I'm going to allow my colleague on my right here to give an outline.
So naturally, it's a very rough figure, because you have to take into account staff that are off sick and vacancies and all of that type of thing. But naturally, they would report that caseload was an average of 16. And if we did our calculations crudely like that, they come out around about 16 to 19, depending on what month it is. But we've tried to be fairer than that. And what we do is, say, for assessment team, because of the work and the throughput of the work, we would expect social workers to be working to an average of 25, but the children in care team would be expected to work to an average of about 18. And we say average because obviously you have people off sick, you have vacancies and all of that type of thing, so they might fluctuate. The last time during our monitoring visit too, we hit all of those, and we were asked to provide the information to the inspectors. And we did actually hit the targets exactly how we wanted. So there's various different rates depending on which team they're in, and you'll see those in the improvement plan that's attached. But that's how we operate it. But they are fluid. But we're not going over, so we used to go over by sort of 10 or 15 cases for some social workers. We're not doing that now. It is a much healthier. Yeah.
I have one more question.
Please do, yeah.
You looked after children. You're changing some terminologies in this report of references. Is there another word that one could use rather than looked after children? I wonder whether the children would value a change of terminology.
Yeah, my preference is cared for children rather than looked after children. It does vary again across the country. Every local authority has its own terminology, but that's how I would prefer us to call our children in our care. I am well, still part of my induction process really, have been invited to meet with our Insight and Ignite groups. So would want to, depending on what they want to talk to me about, have that conversation as well. But we've also, care experienced young people used to be our care leavers, and that's a protective factor now. So that's a change in language. And actually, I think we are trailblazers in comparison to many local authorities in terms of the recognition of our care experienced young people. Lots of other local authorities are following suit now as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa, yes.
Thanks, Chair. Could you explain who, when you say you use unregistered providers, sort of where you need to, could you explain who the unregistered providers would be?
Yeah, so unregistered providers are children's placements, children's homes where those providers haven't been regulated. So Ofsted don't have an inspection regime around them. In terms of so that's it in a nutshell. But in terms of our quality assurance and evaluation, ongoing evaluation around risk, so we are meeting with the providers on a weekly basis. We are having, so the children in those placements are seen on a weekly basis, either by their allocated social worker or somebody else within the network. The team managers and the service manager meets with me on a weekly basis for us to review in terms of the measures that we put in place to safeguard our children. And actually, there's a flip side to this, if you like, in regards to those children in these current arrangements in these current homes. They're all making some progress, and we have to look at the progress that they're making and balance that up in terms of the desire and need to move them into registered, regulated placements as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah. Thanks. That's very helpful. Thank you.
I think Cathy wanted to add to that.
All I wanted to say, Sarah's absolutely right, but I wanted to say this isn't a BCP issue. This is a national issue. There is a sufficiency issue nationally, and so there is a real challenge around finding the right placement for probably some of our quite needy and traumatised young people.
Thank you. Andy, I think you indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've only been on the authority for 3 months or so, but I've been following it very closely since the very beginning. And one of the things that struck me in the last 3 months or so has been how much discussion there is around the culture of the council and the supporting of the staff around things like transformation and the ongoing pressures that everybody in local government, in terms of working in local government, not so much the councillors, but those working in local government, the pressure they have to deal with. And I guess that's particularly the case in children's services for all the reasons that are very obvious. So my question really is, and you touched on it quite a lot towards the end of your summing up earlier on about support and culture. So I just wondered, without trying to be controversial, I'm just interested to know how well the council is doing in supporting people, everybody who works in children's services, given the enormous load that is on you all the time.
I think people are trying very hard to support children's services against a backdrop of some really difficult transformation issues. There's a lot of transformation work going on. There's a lot of work around the ICS, so health are also transforming. So there's a lot of discussions about place. We are asked to participate in that agenda as well as our improvement agenda. That always challenges capacity. I would say that we have worked really hard to demonstrate that we want to be a good corporate player within that corporate world, which I don't think we've always been. And that has been reciprocated back of our corporate colleagues now wanting to, what can we do for children? And I think there is a road of I was going to say education, that's not right, but for understanding each position, so understand what we do and we're understanding what they're doing, and so we can find ways of working together. So I think it's a positive journey that we're on, and it's mutually beneficial, and we're mutually appreciating the challenges that everybody has together. I hope that answers your question in some way.
Okay, I've got a few bits and bobs in it. I'm afraid they're all a bit random because a few of them have been sort of, you know, people have discussed a few of them already. I mean, first off, we could go back to Mosaic because I think it's so it's live, it's working, yeah. Is it now? Is everybody using it, or is it going to be rolled out to even more people? So everybody who's going to use it is using it now. I'm sure it's far too early to review what difference that's made, but I'm sure we'll look at that in the future. Mentioned the 333 hub. I know a number of us went to visit it when it first opened. It was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the cake was wonderful as well, and the coffee was as well, which is a very rare occurrence. It would be nice in some time in the future to be able to have another visit. I would suggest not immediately, maybe when the new council starts and people's had a chance to settle in and find what their interests are. I think it would be great to have another visit to see what's going on there, because I found in my visit it was a great learning environment, and there was a lot going on. The term learning environment, I think coming back to Andy, what you was just saying in the culture, and you mentioned the learning, I think that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? A lot of people use that, but a lot of places say they've got a learning environment, but they haven't. It would be nice to know how we could measure that at some later point, but I know that's a difficult thing to do. Yeah, yes, please do.
Just to come back on that, and then my colleagues may have some other examples, but one of the examples we would have, so if you think about sitting next to a social worker doing an audit of their case, Ofsted reported in their last monitoring visit that some of the social workers said they were finding that, although it was challenging, it was a supportive process. So we would do audits and sit next to a social worker and look through the case and say, did you think about this? How about that? How does that work? You're doing some really, really good work, but you haven't recorded it. So you go through the case with them and they say, is that whilst that is a challenging environment, it's a supportive environment, and they were appreciating it and felt that it was a positive. And so that's what we want to hear. And we need more of that. So we demonstrate we're learning and we're supporting people to learn. We're not shaming or damning or whatever, or making people feel unable to say, actually, I didn't do a great job today. Yeah, we all have days where we don't do a great
it's a
job.
difference between supportive and challenging and judgmental, isn't it? Yeah. And that's the please do come back to my please do, yes.
I think Juliet's got a really good example of what we've done around the domestic abuse training, and going out to the workforce and asking the workforce, what do they feel they didn't know? What do they feel that they needed more information on? And then designed the domestic abuse training around what the staff had told them. So I think that's really important to be asking our staff and encouraging them to come forward like that on what would be useful for them.
And one of the things, picking up the terminology, that the care experience young people, I think the best thing to do is ask the young people, isn't it? And I know, I mean, Sandra sort of whispered this or said this out loud. I don't know if you realise that they will tell you. The corporate parenting board, young people will have an opinion about what they'd like to be called, and it may change, from year to year. I'm sure it will. It's yes. Well, it's a listen, isn't it? It's a listen because we all like to be called what we're comfortable being called, don't we? Are there any other questions or points on this? Okay, in that case, a quick sum up, and I've made a. So we've talked about caseloads, the optimum number. We've talked about a bit of use of the terminology. Unregistered providers, there was quite a lot of information about what they were and what that means, because it's not quite what it sounds like, is it? And we've talked about the culture of the council and the learning environment. I'm not sure if I've missed anything there. Okay, in that case, we've been going now in this meeting for 2 hours and 11 minutes. I will suggest that we all take we've got a couple of items left to deal with. I'll suggest we take a 10-minute break just to stretch our legs and refill our cups and empty other things. I'll give you, shall we say, it'll be 20 past, that'll be 9 minutes. Okay, thank you. Welcome back to the second part of the Children's Overview and Scrutiny. We're on to agenda item 10, which is School Attainment and Progress 2021 to 22. So this was added to the agenda by the committee back in 22nd of November meeting, because if you remember rightly, we had an item on that then, but it was unvalidated data was looking at. So we thought it'd be useful to get an overview of the data once it has been validated. So I'd like to welcome Julia Coleman, the Head of Service, and Georgie Pinter, the Secondary Advisor in Education Improvement and Service, to present the report. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Chair. I don't know whether it's the excitement of everybody taking a break, but for some reason my camera can't see all of you. So I can see that you can see me, which is great. And as the Chair has said, the report that we've resubmitted is really for information and for requesting any questions that you might have. So we have had the data validated. We highlighted in yellow anything that substantially changed. Most of the changes were slight improvements in performance compared to other areas. So we went up in most quartiles or quintiles, depending on how each of them are measured. It hasn't altered the priorities, which if you go to section 55 remain the same. And it's a mixture of pre-existing priorities, such as narrowing the gap, particularly for economically disadvantaged children, improving the outcomes for children who are in our care and SEND, and also really looking and digging into the gender divide in education in BCP, which is partly structural because we have such a lot of boys and girls provision post 14. And so it remains generally a very positive news story. We have a very healthy education system, and although it isn't covered in the report, except for one school, every school has either maintained its Ofsted grade since COVID or has improved it by at least one grade. And so the system is quite healthy, but the education of young people is obviously undermined somewhat by COVID and by having a very uncertain examination system for the past 2 years. In March, the government, as it says in the report, will produce progress data, but it will be very difficult to measure the progress of cohorts, which tends to be over a key stage, because we've had 2 years of no year 6 testing and the like, and of course most children haven't sat an external exam until this year, and the exams will continue to be slightly altered, including this academic year. So if there are any questions, Sarah and I would very much welcome them, but over to you.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd say that it was very useful having the yellow highlighting on the changes. It meant, it was a much quicker job to look at the data than having to pick it up and start afresh. Because now, I mean, I don't know what people have got. Other people have got questions, but my question was there any surprises? Was there anything interesting there to highlight? Other, you said the changes are reasonably small. Was there anything you sort of went, that's interesting, or something we might take any trends out of on data change?
It's just no, that in between the unvalidated and validated data, there were no really strong new questions. We do have some sort of longer for unfolding questions, which means that because we've been in a period of time where we've not been able to meet as a system across educational phase, one of the priorities that everybody can see is transitions, because as we know in BCP, we have a lot of them, infant into juniors, middle school system, lots and lots of post-16 provision in schools and so on. And one of the things that we're looking forward to this year is that on 5 or 6 occasions, the head teachers in BCP are going to meet together cross-phase to look at those gaps and concerns, because early years has had a very difficult 2 years. And that remains one of the worries in terms of recruitment and retention of staff. Are children school ready? And have children had sufficient preparation to move from years 5 and 6 into 7 and all the other transitions that they have to do? And have we been able to show them what their future in education would look like? So, for example, schools have done really well at improving maths. It was great to hear the head of the virtual school say that mathematics is something that they achieve a lot in. Having said that, very, very few girls are taking maths. So they're taking maths, but they're not doing STEM subjects more generally, and computing in particular to level 3. So somewhere along the way, there are some curious questions to ask about, do we support the children through transitions? But that's hasn't really come out of a big change in the data. It's more part of the structure and the sort of lines of inquiry that head teachers and ourselves are looking at the moment.
One interesting thing that you did say, which I hadn't picked up, but you've just said it, is the average Ofsted grading of schools across. Do we keep a track of the average in a year, and therefore
Yes.
the average has gone up?
Yes.
This past year. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has other people got any questions? Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I think it's a really good report, and I think section 55, the priorities, summarises what needs to happen next. Can I just ask a question on that section, please? Sure. And that is that just a general list that you give to the schools and say focus on this, or have you got any initiatives that actually address some of these priorities, which you actually share with the schools and support them to hopefully see improvements in these areas?
We do both. So one of the things that has been a real pleasure of working with the head teachers in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole before they existed as a coherent group, and since they have, is that they had a really strong curiosity about what sort of a place we are. And so probably about half of those priorities were ones that before COVID we had already identified. And one of the things that we're going to be doing every September, now that we're back to a kind of normal, is that we're going to invite over Doug Gubbins from Dorset, who is their number cruncher there, and our colleagues here. And we're going to speak to the head teachers to test out against the data, but also their experience of, are these still our priorities? Are there new ones? Are there emerging ones? So early years, for example, the things about worrying about whether the children are school ready and what information should we share. So we tend, rather than to tell them what to do, we work together to work out what are the projects that we might do together in order to address them, and also where is their good practice, because sometimes there will be very good practice inside of a school. So for example, 2 schools, one primary, one secondary, are helping the others around maths mastery at the moment. So we're looking at setting up networks with them and a whole variety of things to address it. So it's a combination of things that the data tells them that they bring to us, but it's also something that they share all their data with us, which is a great privilege for us. And then we share it back to them in terms of what we think the trees to bark up might be in terms of next steps. And that's something that we're working with them on over the coming months in great detail.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking. Anybody else got any questions? Sandra.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is something that I'm really curious about, so if you could indulge me with this. It's about the Key Stage 2 section.
Okay.
In the past, and at Poole schools, struggled, and I use the word struggled politely, to get decent results at Key Stage 2. I mean, it was a huge struggle, and they did all sorts of things to you know, try to improve that, but they didn't really manage it. However, when I look at this report, the paragraph 16 says that overall pupil attainment in 2022 remains above national in all indicators. So can I safely assume that the struggle is over and Poole schools are performing at Key Stage 2 as well as their neighbours? Thank you.
Well, there's a long answer really, and the long answer is obviously we're a different place now. So there are, as there were in 2018 and 19, there are things that Poole was really strong on. So one of the things I would have said that Poole was a real leading light on was early years. Was really, really strong in transition into year one. And then in Christchurch, for example, girls were incredibly good at maths and better before we started than other parts. So we don't look at it, we don't cut the data that way anymore. So when we say that they're better, we could cut it if we wanted to have a look and see. What we do instead is we kind of look at what are the individual schools where they need a lift or they've really worked something out. So, for example, Merley First have got a brilliant head teacher who's brilliant at maths and is very good at improving it in transition. And she's going to do that with lots of other schools over the coming months. Summerford are really good at promoting reading. So it's more identifying it at school level. So the short answer is I don't know without us cutting the data by borough. And obviously, since we became BCP, we are actively discouraged from looking at it that way. And we're still finding out who we are. So I would say that the parts of the communities that are slightly different, and we do look by community, tend to be sort of on some of the fault lines between some of the areas slightly inland. So we do map it. So we do look at where particular strengths are, and we're thinking of doing that for curriculum, but we don't really look at them that way. So it doesn't mean that Key Stage 2 isn't it may not still be a struggle in some Poole schools, but the head teachers will also have changed a great deal in that short period of time, as they have.
Okay, thank you for that.
That's
lovely
okay.
answer. Well done.
That's not a problem.
I've got a question which is going to be quite, it's difficult to answer. It's looking at that, the girls and STEM subjects, which is something which has always been sort of on my mind. It's a national issue, and it's not just a BCP issue, isn't it? And I'll suggest it's not actually down to the schools. It's also down to society and language and assumptions. Is there any work being done either locally or nationally to address this that might make a difference?
Locally, I'm not going to speak about nationally, but locally, we think that the biggest issue is actually transitions between organisations. And so we also have this thing that is a little bit different to nationally, which is that we have a lot of schools that are not faith schools that are gender divided. That's quite unusual in most parts of the country. So you might still find in some legacy areas where there's a lot of faith schools that you'll find them divided by gender. And sometimes that can be an advantage to the girls rather than a disadvantage. There's some really good practice at breaking down some of those barriers inside of our schools, treating them a bit more as a campus. And there's a real openness and willingness around some of our selective schools to work much more closely across the genders. But it's a mixture of things. Locally, one of the things that we have as a very rich resource is we have a lot of women who do non-stereotypically specific leadership in the area. So there are a lot of women who are big in finance. There are lots of women who are at the top of scientific and engineering organisations. And what we do is we link those people to all 36 of our secondary and secondary SEND schools, so that they've got an example of, if I can see it, I can be it. Because obviously that doesn't just apply to girls, but it also applies to economically disadvantaged boys, because they sort of look in society and perhaps think that it's not their place to go for the very top apprenticeships or to university. So we try to break some of those ideas down. But we do an awful lot of work with the universities on STEM in primaries and secondaries, because we figure the sooner that we're working with the children, the better.
Thank you very much for that answer. It's very reassuring. I'm looking around. Have we got anybody else with any questions? I don't think so. In that case, thank you very much for that presentation. Just having a look at what we've talked about. We've talked about Ofsted school trends. We've looked at in section 5, the 55, sorry, the list shared with schools and how that creates improvements. We've talked about the Key Stage 2 selection and progress historically, which is more complicated than it might sound. And we've talked about girls and STEM subjects. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Okay, we're now on to item 11, the Brighter Futures Children's Services Key Performance Indicators, quarter 3. So this was added to the agenda in June last year in consultation with me. I've got down, Rena was going to present this, but I think, Rachel, you're going to present this.
Yeah, I'm thinking. So yes,
well, thank you very much for stepping in.
That's fine. So this is the usual report that comes to ONS, and I'll take it that you have all read it. It provides the performance update for October to December, so that's quarter 3, and is based on the key performance indicators for children's services, and reported in exactly the same format as the presentation that we went through earlier, in the layout of which Ofsted inspect us. So if I can draw your attention to the summary and recommendations, I think that's probably the easiest place to take you to, and you'll see there are some actions to be taken or planned to be noted for these indicators that are emerging as areas of concern. And in your pack, you will also see that there are exceptions reports written for each one of those. So I'll open it to the floor for any questions that anybody might have.
Hey, is there anybody else who would like to start? Yes, Annabelle.
In the last meeting, an MYP raised a question about permanent exclusions and the fact that equality's implications listed people who could be disproportionately affected. We would like to know more about what's being done to understand if they're being affected, and if so, what work is being done to address this.
I'll hand over to Sarah.
Thank you. So we have an education entitlement board, which is a new board. It's been going since October, I think it is. And at that board, we are trying to get in early before those permanent exclusions happen. So it's about offering support to schools and to the young people themselves before any exclusions happen. We have a team who offer that support in the inclusion team, and it's very much about that sort of early support. In terms of other sort of vulnerable groups, so children in care, the virtual school will support schools for children who are at risk of exclusion. And we're very pleased to say that we don't have any children in care who have been permanently excluded.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Okay, is it? Great, thank you. Yeah, Kathy, would you so like to follow that?
I just wanted to check whether it did in terms of can't say the word, disproportionality. Did it answer the question for you? Or whether that's something we need to go away and come back to you?
Yeah, we were looking at specifically the BAME groups, and so maybe that's something we could go back on. I don't know. Okay.
I can get those. I can get those stats. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a very relevant and pertinent question, and so I think it would be good for us to come back to you on that.
Yeah. That would be good. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. I think that would be very, very helpful. I think that would just tie it up. Sandra, did I see your hand up? Yes, I did.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The use of the part-time timetables. I asked about this last time, and they're still concerning me, I'm afraid. And obviously you're working with the schools, but they still seem to be using them quite frequently. I also know that alternative provision needs to be put in, and there's a bit of a shortage of that as well. And I'm just wondering whether or not, I did raise this before, on whether or not any more venues have become available since the last time I asked. Thank you.
Do you want me to come in again, Rachel?
Yes, please, Sarah.
Yeah, so the first thing about part-time timetables. So some schools will support students on part-time timetables. Sometimes they can be used for reintegration. They can be used really well. We would ask that schools share those stats with us if they do have children on part-time timetables, so we can track those. You know, and sometimes they're an intervention that can be used in a supportive manner, but we wouldn't want them to go on for too long. In terms of alternative provision, so we have got a whole review going on at the moment with alternative provision. So I can bring that back to a future overview and scrutiny, because it's happening at the moment. In terms of have we got any more provision opening up, I think it's a case of understanding exactly the sort of provision that we need in BCP first of all, before looking at do we need any more.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, a future meeting around part-time timetables and alternative provision would be actually really, really useful. If I'm still here, I would welcome that.
Yeah, I mean, because I was going to ask something about part-time time. So you've covered most of it actually, but it's sort of a question of how does a part-time timetable affect a pupil's attendance figures? Yeah. Because I mean, it always used to be. I don't know if it's still the case. The attendance is a reasonably blunt thing. It is two attendance slots per day in a school, and if the student is there at that moment in time when the register is called, they're attending. But if they turn up late, they're marked as absent, even though they might have been there for 3/4 of that part of time. And likewise, if somebody is there for that moment when the register is taken, even though they might not attend for the rest of the session, they're still marked as present. Is that still the case? And does part-time timetable badly affect the look of attendance rather than the actual attendance? Yeah, what I'm trying to say is, because somebody just because they're not in for that first hour of the day because of an issue means that all the time they only get half presence.
It depends how it's coded, and we can certainly get some stats on it. It does depend if the schools share that information with us. We're hoping with the new working together to improve attendance guidance. So there's a new DFE portal that schools will be signing up to, or hopefully all schools will be signing up to, where that data would be, at the touch of a button. So yeah, depending on how it's coded, it will affect attendance.
Yes, so the next bit of the question is that, because I thought that might, do all schools understand how the coding works and what coding they should use, or do you think there's some either misunderstanding or misuse of coding on occasions?
I wouldn't necessarily say it was misuse. I think we need to have a BCP understanding of what coding we're using.
I should say accidental misuse, shall we say? because we can all do it. Yes. Has anybody else got any particular questions? I think I had one more, but we might have covered it. Oh yes, it was the NEET, the not education training for young people who are of college age. Is it still the case? Are there some young people who would like to be in college, but just because of the starting time and dates of the college means that they are sitting waiting? And does that affect the percentage or the numbers for the NEETs?
Yes.
Can anything? Because my thought is within a school that sort of does. If you're key stage 2, 3, 4, and you want to start school, the school, if they've got space for you, find a way of getting you there the next day if it's at all possible. If it's part of the way through a course, and I think probably in sixth forms in schools that's also probably the case. That if you've got somebody who needs to. In a college, I think probably because the funding is different. Can anything be done to enable young people to start college because they want to start college? Can funding be provided for them?
Partway through a course, I'm not sure there's much that we can do. It's certainly something that we can look into, but yes, it would affect their attendance if they're waiting for a course to start.
Right, I thought that might be the case, but it's nice to have it clarified. Are there any other questions at all? In that case, we'll just do a quick sum up of that. We looked at permanent exclusions, looking at particular groups of permanent exclusions, and some more work to be done on that. Particularly the BAME groups, I think was mentioned disproportionately. We've talked about part-time timetables and how neat how they say how neat people are at college, but you understand what I mean. How the neat numbers at college are affected sometimes by start dates. So we've got the portfolio holders update here. Now, Irene isn't here, but she's given me an update. But I'm going to go to you, Mike, first, just to give me a rest, if that's possible. If you have an update for us.
Yeah, great, Richard. Thanks very much. It's been a long meeting, so I'll be brief. We're obviously, as you all know, into the pre-election PERDA period in about 6 weeks' time. So obviously there will be very little happening in terms of new policies or new procedures. The main remaining item of business that we have to conclude, of course, is the budget. Goes to Cabinet tomorrow and Council on the 21st. As you know, in children's services, we have major pressures on things like care costs, staffing costs, and school transport. You may have seen the draft that's going to Cabinet tomorrow, which proposes a 14.6 million increase in the children's services budget, or around 20%. I hope if that goes forward through to Council, you'll feel able to support it. My final comment is really just to thank you for your work as a committee over the last 3 years or so. I mean, your discussions, your recommendations, they've always been constructive and helpful, and we've always managed to avoid political point scoring. Indeed, I think we've all really managed to work together to try to get the very best outcomes for our children and young people. So big thank you to everyone on the committee. That's it from me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. I've got something to read from Nicola, which I shan't do an impression. I shall just read it. I did think about it, but it's getting too late. We are delighted that 5 BCP schools have been accepted into the government's priority schools rebuilding programme. Summerford and Winchelsea, which are local authority maintained, and Highcliffe, Caulfields and Heathlands, which are academies. We look forward to hearing about this significant investment in our schools, estates, and the benefit this will bring to young people who attend these schools. Our Send Improvement Board is being refreshed to align with the overall children's improvement strategy. Now there has been a change here from what you've been. I believe actually that Kathy, you're taking over as chair of that. That's should I say well done, congratulations, or yeah.
Let's wait and see.
Yeah, okay. You would like to record a thanks to Claire Burgess, who has led us through our inspection and the written statement of actions, and for her boundless enthusiasm, dedication to the children of BCP who are sent. So that's the report there. So we're left with forward plan. Are there any comments on the forward plan? Eddie.
You might have guessed, Mr. Chairman. Just one item. I know it's on the forward plan, child exploitation, but can I thank you and obviously the working group. We had a great working group. What was it? 10 days, 2 weeks ago. But as Sandra said, it is very important when for the next committee going ahead that it's not lost in the system, and it should be a priority. And can we also ask perhaps the young people for some feedback from them at the next committee, or get some feedback on that topic? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Eddie, for that, and that will certainly make sure that we make a clear steer that we'd like that to carry on. So I've actually got two things to do. One is mention the date of the next meeting, which is the 6th of June, which is past a certain watershed moment. Might be the last time we're all together. May I just thank all members of the committee, present and past. I know some of us have been here for the whole 4 years now, in one form or another. Yes, well, some has liked it, left us and missed us so much, came back. And thanks to the officers for the work that you've done. Thanks for the portfolio holders, present and past, for their engagement. And thank you, Louise, for all the work, keeping us on the straight and narrow, chasing things up for us, explaining things to us, and helping us out. So I hope some of us meet again at the committee. In that case, I shall the meeting is closed.